Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Oh, you guys are so kind. I truly appreciate that. It's always a pleasure to rise in this House and speak on behalf of the good people of Calgary-Midnapore. I was very fortunate to have my annual general meeting this weekend, and it was just so lovely to reconnect with so many supporters, so many constituents, and they are also supporters of the Leader of the Official Opposition. I'm very lucky to have the mother of the Leader of the Official Opposition in my riding. He is, of course, raised in Calgary-Midnapore. I'm so incredibly proud of this fact. But indeed, these citizens as well expressed to me that they are very tired of the corruption of this government, of the fiscal mismanagement of this government, and they are also looking forward to a carbon tax election where finally we can return good governance to Canada and bring in the Leader of the Official Opposition, the member for Carleton, as our Prime Minister. So hopeful, happy days ahead, most definitely. Madam Speaker, I am up for the third time speaking on this motion, and the point that I would like to raise today, Madam Speaker, is just the irony that even though this is the third time that I am up speaking on this motion, I actually have a new, fresh list of scandals and corruption relative to the matter at hand, which is, of course, the Green Slush Fund documents. I'll start by saying, Madam Speaker, as I'm sure you very well know, the Leader of the Official Opposition has given me the honour and the privilege of being the Shadow Minister for the Treasury Board, the Minister of the Treasury Board, the President of the Treasury Board's counterpart. And last week, Madam Speaker, she was making a lot of noise about the release of supply. Would supply be released so that government can continue? Now, I think that the official opposition showed its goodwill in coming forward in the motions which we voted on late into the night, Thursday night. But very frankly, to the President of the Treasury Board, if she's listening, the fastest way that supply could be guaranteed would be to hand over the documents, frankly, and stop this charade of corruption and really bring this to a close so that we can get on with the governing of Canada. We can work together to continue that. But as long as these documents are outstanding, we will have to continue to bring this to the attention of Canadians. This is how it is. So this is one incident, Madam Speaker, that has occurred since the last time that I spoke on this. As my other colleagues have mentioned, I was very fortunate this morning to be in the room at 7:30 to have a preview of the Auditor General reports. They are public now, Madam Speaker, so I can talk about them, but there certainly were many damning features of these reports, of the evaluation of the Auditor General. And they included reports on defence procurement, that this procurement isn't necessarily being timely, providing value for money. This is no surprise with this government. This is a theme that we have seen. It is seen that the management of seniors programs by this government is being poorly handled, and as a result, we have many seniors living below the poverty line as a result of this government not being able to manage the programs to seniors. And most notable, as was mentioned by my colleague previously, was the management of the CEBA program during the pandemic. It was a failure of the Minister of Finance. Interesting facts unearthed in this audit by the Auditor General. As my colleague mentioned, Accenture, the company that awarded the contract to themselves, provided the vast majority of their work from Brazil. 9%, Madam Speaker, 9% of those who received the money were found to be ineligible. That's really something. And it's just hard to believe that in these hundreds of millions of dollars that were handed out, that if we think about the 9% of that, I mean, that is really a significant amount. And no surprise what we've seen with Arrive Scam, as we like to call it, that that Accenture chose to award these funds to themselves. and they received $313 million, or 92% of the entire funds that were in contracts that were awarded to those who were delivering SEBA. So once again, in the Auditor General reports just issued this morning, just announced this morning, we are seeing again incompetence of this government, with 9% of funds being given to ineligible recipients. And again, the same old fraudsters and scamsters and friends of the Liberal government getting ahead, whereby Accenture, first of all, awarded 92% of the contracting to themselves and then completed a large majority of that. 92% is more than a large majority, Madam Speaker, amount of that contracting out of country. And that is just this morning. But I have more scandal mismanagement, Madam Speaker, since the last time I was up here to speak. Of course, we have the GST 2-month tax holiday. And I actually see reports here today in the news. This government certainly likes to talk about us following our leader. We are proud to support the member for Carleton, but he does, in fact, consult with us and take our opinions into account. But I'm not sure that this is the same on the other side of the aisle, Madam Speaker, as I see Liberals were not happy that they did not get consulted regarding the GST 2-month tax trick, Madam Speaker. So again, this is just another example of the corruption, of this mismanagement that we are seeing. And of course, with this GST implementation, it's very unfortunate because it forces small businesses to have to make significant administrative changes for a brief period of time and then change it back. Of course, if we're talking about the mismanagement of funds, as we are here with the Green Slush Fund, then we also need to mention the amount of government administration that it will take in an effort to do this 2-month tax trick. And of course, we know, Madam Speaker, if the Prime Minister really was concerned about the well-being of Canadians, he would just eliminate the carbon tax. But he has not done this as of yet. Instead, he has just done this 2-month tax trick. As well, Madam Speaker, with this 2-month tax trick, the carbon tax would be applied to heating, gas, groceries, the farmers, those who deliver the food, the grocers who sell the food, etc. Whereas in this case, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister took the decision upon himself to determine the items which are specific to Canadians, where they will receive the GST off the items, even though it is just for this minimal 2-month amount of time. But, Madam Speaker, I think it just speaks to the larger problem that we are discussing here, that we are having a conversation about, and that is, again, just the fiscal incompetency, the economic incompetency of this government, the mismanagement of funds specifically relative to the Green Slush Fund, and they're withholding the documents. And of course, unfortunately, Madam Speaker, this goes beyond our borders. We had, of course, our neighbor to the south, the president-elect, indicate that he was going to slap Canada with a 25% tax. And the Prime Minister went down to have a conversation with the president-elect, does what he does best, which is have selfies with individuals. He did the same thing, was really happy to share this selfie with the world, but he came back empty-handed, as was indicated by my leader, by the member for Carleton. And again, this just shows the mismanagement of money, the mismanagement of our economy, Madam Speaker, and the Green Slush Fund is just a single example of that. So as you can see, Madam Speaker, I have taken the first half of my speech to actually talk about new scandal, new mismanagement that has occurred, everything from Liberal insiders getting rich with the handing over of $312 million of contracts to expenditure, to the 2-month tax trick. All of these things just are new things since the last time I was here to make some points about the Green Slush Fund. And this 25% tariff would come at a terrible time, as I'm sure you're aware, the Parliamentary Budget Officer expects the federal government to have a deficit of $46.8 billion in fiscal year 2023-2024, and that is deeper than the $40 billion forecasted by the finance minister in the April budget, but this is no surprise. And in reviewing some of the documents in the Auditor General report this morning, it was astounding to me that some of these initiatives for which departments were mandated were actually not achieved because they did not have the funding. And my mind struggles to think, if you run a $46.8 billion deficit, how could you not achieve your mandates? It's one thing to make the decisions, to promise things to Canadians, but then to break these promises, and a lot of times, as is determined by the issue that we're discussing here, the inability to hand over the documents. It can be corruption, but in other cases, it's just poor planning and poor mismanagement. So in reading these Auditor General reports this morning, again, when I see these reports, I'm left to wonder, is it mismanagement? Yes, in some cases, I think it is. But again, in the case of Accenture, I think that it might be another case of conflict of interest whereby Liberals are giving their money to friends. So there's that. But this Conservative opposition has just been fantastic in terms of exposing different areas of not only mismanagement, but just frankly poor governance. And another example that comes to my mind, Madam Speaker, in addition to the Green Slush Fund, is how this Liberal government ignored scientists and residents over wildfire risk to Jasper. I think our team did an incredible job of unearthing this. I see the member for McMurray Cold Lake, who did fantastic work on this, as well as the member for Red Deer Lacombe, as well as the member for Sturgeon River Parkland, all did incredible work on this. So that would be most definitely another example. I talked at the beginning, Madam Speaker, about how my constituents at this annual general meeting this weekend expressed to me their interest in having a carbon tax election. But speaking of the carbon tax, Madam Speaker, this is another situation where this government refused to hand over the documents, where they declined to release their internal analysis of economic impacts of carbon pricing, and refusing to say why it was keeping the data secret, even as it criticized the federal budget watchdog for an error in its analysis of the policy. So we have another situation whereby the government did not hand over the documents, similar to the situation that we have today. Another example that we would have of the government not handing over the documents would be, there are so many, I don't even know which one to choose from, Madam Speaker. But another one would be in the We charity. We remember this. I'm actually going back now to the previous government before this current government, and where the government released thousands of pages of documents related to the We matter, as the committee requested, but rather than have the independent law clerk redact information, such as cabinet confidences and personal information, the various departments responsible for this program did the blackouts themselves, in apparent contravention of the committee's request. So this was another example, Madam Speaker, where we did not receive the documents. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office said that the redactions were done by the parliamentary law clerk, who was following the committee's direction to remove documents covered by cabinet confidentiality and personal information about Canadian citizens. But the law clerk said in a confidential August 18th letter to the clerk of the Finance Committee that the vast majority of blackouts had been done by government bureaucrats, and under whose direction, I wonder, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, another situation where we did not receive the documents was an issue I worked on intensely, the ArriveCAN scandal. And this situation specifically was where the Canada Border Services Agency missed the deadline to hand over ArriveCAN invoices and declined to identify subcontractors. And I feel as though this, once again, is a theme within this government, declining to identify subcontractors, in addition to not handing over documents. And I'm very grateful for the work by the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, in doing such good work on Indigenous procurement, because this is a similar thing where we want to ensure that subcontractors are also, and their practices are also evaluated to ensure that they meet government guidelines and government rules and regulations. Now, of course, the terrible finale of the ArriveCan scandal was when we had one of the two partners of GC Strategies, Mr. Christian Firth, here at the bar in front of Parliament. But this is just another example of the lack of oversight of this government, the amount of corruption that we continue to talk about here in the House today. We also have the situation with the Winnipeg labs, where the documents were not handed over, and again, these are the most extreme of cases and the most delicate of cases when we look at the security, our national security. And in fact, as per usual, the New Democratic Party worked with the Liberals in an effort to shut down a hearing on the Prime Minister's Winnipeg lab documents scandal. The documents detailed the infiltration of Canada's highest security lab, and the Prime Minister defied 4 orders of Parliament and took the House of Commons to court to block the release of these documents. And this was, in fact, the only time a sitting Prime Minister has done this in Canadian history, Madam Speaker. So again, another example where this government, this Prime Minister, went out of their way, as we continue to discuss here today, the handing over of documents, the covering up of information. The Prime Minister's attempts to cover up interference at Canada's most secure lab has put the safety and security of Canadians at risk. In 2019, it was revealed scientists working at Canada's high security lab were collaborating clandestinely with the People's Republic of China. Alarm bells were first rung in August of 2018, and it took 10 months for these scientists to be marched out of the lab. 10 months when parliamentarians first asked for these documents to be released. The Liberal government refused. So we just have so many examples here. Another example that we have is where they have avoided responsibility would be the New York, the purchase of the $9 million residence in New York, whereby we know that Tom Clark approached his good friend, the Prime Minister, and asked for a change of residence. But again, this government is passing off this blame onto, they're not taking responsibility, they're passing it on to bureaucrats when they need to, once again, take responsibility. There are just endless examples here, Madam Speaker. It's just excuses. And as I said, these more recent in my speech examples that I've given happened over a series of the last 9 years. But even if we look at just today, we have the CEBA situation, which happened, defense procurement, seniors living below the poverty line, and then this week alone, the 2 months tax trick and the unwillingness to do anything regarding the 25% tariff from our neighbors to the south. Madam Speaker, Aristotle, I will close with the quote I did my last speech. Aristotle said, "Character is revealed through actions." Time and time and time again, this government has revealed their poor character. And since I gave a similar speech on this same subject not long ago, it has remained the same. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my colleagues for sitting through that. That was
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member opposite spoke about character, and I'm just curious how she feels about the CBC story breaking today that India interfered in or allegedly interfered in the leadership race, and that members of her own caucus were encouraged to step down from helping any leader other than their current leader. If you're talking about character, then how does the member opposite respond to these allegations that their official leader couldn't win that leadership election unless there was a finger on the scale?
Questions? The honourable member Calgary-Midnapore.
Yeah, thank you very much to my colleague for that question. You know, I was very proud to serve as the Alberta campaign chair for the leader for Carleton, and I can tell you we swept Alberta. And so I am not concerned at all about the support of and the tipping the scale. To me, it just absolutely sounds ridiculous. And I think it's unfortunate that that she would say such things about that, and I think it just speaks to the desperation of the Liberal government over there. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, and there seems to have been some individuals, on both sides of the House, that were trying to have conversations. I just want to ask them to please not do that when someone else has the floors, and if members have additional questions, they should wait till the appropriate time. Questions and comments. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her speech. I also had, coincidentally, an annual general meeting in Vancouver Kingsway this weekend as well. And what I heard from the people who attended my meeting was just how desperately people are struggling in this country right now. Figures back that up. 50% of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 4 parents, according to the Salvation Army, are cutting down on their food intake so that they have enough food for their children, and 80% of Canadians are worried about the holiday spending coming up. Yet, my honourable colleague voted against a GST cut that would reduce the expenses of an average family of several $100s. Now, I was in the House last week when the Conservatives called that chump change. I'm wondering if she agrees with that. Does she think that saving an average family a couple $100s this Christmas is chump change? And as someone who, everybody in this place earns over $200,000 a year, does she not agree with me that that shows a disdain for working and poor people in this country that is unbecoming this chamber?
The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I like this colleague, I appreciate this colleague, but I just think it's so rich coming from someone whose leader is just holding on to this horrible government in an effort to get their pension. It's actually really hard for me to hear that question. I'll also say, Madam Speaker, I genuinely don't believe that the New Democratic Party understands economics. Conservatives understand that the administration of this 2-month tax trick alone will create more administrative burden that will put a greater tax burden on Canadians just in the program itself, and we would be far better off just implementing a carbon tax removal across the board, Madam Speaker.
Then comments, the honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for her amazing speech and for her outstanding work on OGO. I noticed that every time the Liberals get up, they are trying to distract from the actual topic at hand, which is them producing the papers in this green slush fund. It seems that they must have something to hide, so I wondered if the member could comment on that.
Honourable member Calgary-Midnapore.
Yeah, thank you very much to the member for Sarnia-Lambton for that question. I can tell you, Madam Speaker, as a member of the Government Operations Committee, this government will go to any length to hide anything, and we have found that time and time again, whether it's their work with McKinsey, whether it's their work with the ArriveCan. We're going to have to look into Accenture now and see what happened there. But yeah, Indigenous procurement, this government knows no limits when it comes to covering up. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thanks, Madam Speaker. The Conservatives have been blocking us from doing any work for about a month and a half now. So I will bring up some relevant work. This morning, there were some pictures in the news about a homeless camp in Montreal, which was taken apart. Homelessness in Montreal has doubled over the past 5 years. People are dying on the streets in Quebec. In fact, that number has tripled over the past 5 years. We have a serious problem, yet the government cut 3% from the Reaching Home program. That's the only program that helps. So what would the Conservatives do if they were to form government? Not that that's what we want, but what would they do to decrease homelessness in Canada?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much to my colleague. It is a good question. The government does seem to want to spend, but the problem is how and where they're spending. Were we to form a Conservative government, well, we know that our party's leader has 4 priorities: axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. So there will be change, positive change, with a Conservative government. The member for Carleton, as Prime Minister, would change things and make them better.
Madam Speaker, thank the member opposite for her speech. Madam Speaker, I think the party opposite has about 80 pages of speech that they just hand from member to member. It's almost like a fruitcake at Christmas, going around from house to house. But, Madam Speaker, the member opposite speaks about accountability and transparency. So here's my question. Where is the transparency with the leader opposite, the leader of the opposition, with respect to his clearance? He refuses to get it, and more Canadians are wondering why he's refusing that. Secondly, what is up with the allegations of foreign interference with respect to his leadership bid? Can the member opposite comment on that? Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'll say no one likes fruitcake and no one likes the scandal and corruption of this Liberal government. I'll start by saying that. We all know that this government should just release the names, and the member for Carleton knows that. The member for Carleton knows if he receives a clearance, it will be the clearance that the Prime Minister wants to give him. He would like the same clearance or the same briefing that the Washington Post got, and he will not receive that from this Prime Minister. And then, Madam Speaker, he will not be able to speak on the information that he has received. It would be far more transparent if this government would just release the names, but they are not willing to release the names. As for the comment of the foreign interference, the member for Nose Hill gave a very eloquent statement today, and she stated exactly the truth. She is far too experienced a parliamentarian to ever be involved in a situation like this, and of course, the Liberals would not like to listen to her words because they don't like to listen to Conservatives, and even less they like to listen to strong Conservative women. And this is just the same case, Madam Speaker.
In comments, the honourable member for Barrie. The honourable member for Souris, Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In my speech this morning, I talked about accountability and transparency, and I'm just going to ask my colleague. About what she just mentioned, the transparency and accountability. As much as I may like fruitcake more than she does, the couple of people across the way are acting like squirrels chasing nuts around, and they're trying to pick up the nuts and put them in a tree so that they can be dealt with after the next election. We will deal with it after the next election, as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker. But there's a real conflict of interest here, and the conflict of interest is we've already seen. I mean, maybe this is why they're trying to distract us, because they've already got one minister who's been taken out of the government, and we are very concerned about the fact that there may be more ministers. If the SDTC scandal is unveiled, there might be more ministers across the way who will be fired. So I wonder if my colleague could just respond on that.
For answer, the honourable for Calgary-Midnapore.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. For weeks and weeks, the Minister of Employment sat here and defended himself. And in fact, the Prime Minister defended him as well until he had to release in absolute shame over identity fraud, essentially. But even leading up to that identity fraud was just a series of moral lapses. And where there's smoke, there's fire. And I have no doubt that there are so many more fires burning on the other side of the aisle, Madam Speaker. And I say that with a heavy heart. I hope I have to speak on this for a fourth time, but this is where this government has left me and left Canadians, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Before I go to resuming debate again, there's a lot of questions and some of the discussions that are being had that aren't really related to the privilege motion. Maybe if people can do the link to the privilege motion as they're making their question or their statement, that would be very helpful. So again, whether it's on the privilege motion or on the amendments, that would be good.